The bell above the convenience store door chimed as Ghost pushed through, the morning sun cutting sharp lines across the linoleum floor. He'd been riding since dawn, 600 miles with nothing but the hum of the engine and the weight of his own thoughts. The Harley was his church, his confessional, his prison, all at once. He grabbed black coffee, no cream, and a pack of beef jerky. The cashier didn't look up. That was fine. Ghost preferred invisibility. He was good at it. When he stepped back into the parking lot, the Nebraska wind hit him sideways, carrying the smell of dust and prairie. The sky was the color of old concrete. His bike sat 3 spots from the door, chrome gleaming despite the 1,000 miles of road grime clinging to its frame. That's when the hand grabbed his jacket. Ghost spun, reflex automatic, palm already moving toward something that wasn't there anymore. But it wasn't a threat. It was a child, small, dark-haired, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big and sneakers held together with duct tape. "Mister," the boy said, breathless. His eyes were wide, the kind of wide that meant he'd seen something. "Your tire. There's something wrong with your tire." Ghost's hand went slack. He looked at the kid, really looked. Pale face. Clean shirt, despite the poverty of his clothes. Eyes that held the particular terror of a child who'd been taught to notice things, to report things, to be useful. "Show me," Ghost said. The boy led him around the back of the motorcycle, pointing a small finger at the rear tire. Ghost crouched, his knees popping like gunshots in the quiet parking lot. His coffee steamed in his left hand, forgotten. The cut was surgical, not a nail, not a rough puncture from road debris. This was deliberate, precise, angled deep into the sidewall at a point that would hold pressure for maybe 50 miles before catastrophic failure. At 70 miles per hour on the interstate, that tire would blow, the bike would flip, Ghost would be scattered across asphalt like prayer. His hands went still. "I saw a man," the boy whispered. "Last night. He was here when it was dark. He had something shiny. He was looking at the bikes." Ghost's breath came slow, controlled. 20 years of discipline held the panic somewhere below the surface. "Did he say anything?" "No, but—" The boy's voice cracked. "He said a name, your name. He said, 'Ghost will know what this means.'" And then he laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. Every nerve in Ghost's body went electric. He straightened slowly, the boy still standing there, small and afraid, and somehow responsible for saving Ghost's life by accident. Ghost pulled out his wallet, handed the kid a $100 bill without counting. "What's your name, son?" "Tommy." "Tommy. Did this man say anything else?" "He said—" Tommy's eyes went distant, searching memory. "He said, 'Tell him Marcus owes me a son.' He said that twice, real angry-like. The world tilted. 'Marcus owes me a son.'" Ghost closed his eyes. 15 years. 15 years of running, of silence, of building a life separate from the one he'd destroyed. 15 years. And he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd paid enough penance. That maybe the debt had gone unpaid so long it had calcified into something manageable, something that could stay buried. He was wrong. "Tommy," Ghost said quietly, "where's your father?" "At home, 3 miles north, the blue trailer with the oak tree." Ghost's hands were shaking. He made them stop. He looked at the sky, still that color of concrete, but darker now, heavier. Storm coming. He could taste it in the wind. He pulled out his phone, a burner he'd bought in Kansas City, and made the first call he'd made to anyone in 7 years. "This is Ghost," he said when the voice answered. "I need to call in the old oath. I need every brother who remembers, and I need them in Nebraska by sunset. If you're following Ghost's story, like this video now, because what happens next will change everything." The blue trailer sat alone against a dying oak tree, the kind of place that held stories nobody wanted to tell. Ghost pulled up in the gravel drive 20 minutes later, having ditched the bike for a truck borrowed from a mechanic in the last town. His own Harley was in a garage, tire photographed, evidence held close. The man who came out was familiar in a way that made Ghost's chest tight. Daniel Reaper Castillo. They'd ridden together once, before everything went wrong, before Ghost made a choice that cost Reaper his family. Reaper's face was weathered, lined, carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who'd spent 15 years building a life on ashes. His eyes went cold when he recognized Ghost. "You," Reaper said. It wasn't a greeting. "I know what this looks like," Ghost started. "Do you?" Reaper stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a ghost coming back to haunt something it destroyed. It looks like you finally got tired of running." "The boy. My boy," Reaper cut him off. "Tommy. My only kid. The one I had after you took everything else from me, after you put me in the ground and rode away." Reaper's voice was controlled, which made it worse. Rage Ghost could handle. This was something else. This was grief that had learned to speak quietly. "So you better tell me why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now, and why I haven't already told my son to run." Ghost kept his hands visible, empty. "Because you didn't. Because you sent him to find me. Because you want something worse than my death, Reaper. You want me to remember what I owe you." The silence stretched between them like a canyon. "I made a promise," Ghost continued, "when we were young and stupid and thought we were immortal. I swore that if anything ever happened to you, I'd take care of your family, no matter what, no matter how long it took." Ghost's voice cracked just barely. "I broke that promise, Reaper, and I've been running from it ever since." Reaper's jaw clenched. 15 years. 15 years, Ghost. 15 years while I worked double shifts. 15 years while Tommy grew up asking why his uncle disappeared. Why the man who was supposed to be his godfather vanished like smoke. "I know. You don't know anything." Reaper's control slipped just for a moment. "But you're about to. Because whoever cut that tire, whoever sent that message, they're not done. This is just the opening move, Ghost. This is the knock on the door before everything burns." "Who?" Ghost asked. Reaper stared at him for a long moment. "His name is Victor. Victor Corza. He rode with us back in the early days. Before you made lieutenant. Before you became the man everyone feared." Ghost felt the name like a physical blow. Victor. Scarred face. Ruthless. The one who wanted to take the crew darker, deeper, into territory Ghost had refused to go. "Victor went to prison," Ghost said quietly, 12 years ago. "He got out 6 months ago," Reaper said, "and the first thing he did was find me. The first thing he said was your name. He wants to know where you are, Ghost. He wants to make you feel what he felt, and if I don't give him what he wants, he starts with Tommy." The temperature dropped. The world narrowed. "Where is he now?" Ghost asked. "Heading this way, maybe 2 hours out." Reaper stepped back into the trailer. "You've got that long to decide if you're going to run again, or if you're finally going to stand and fight for something other than your own conscience." Ghost didn't move for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone again, scrolled through the contacts he'd memorized, but never stored in any device. The calls started going out, to Hawk in Arizona, to Cross in Colorado, to the others who'd sworn the old oath, who still remembered what it meant to bleed for brothers. "Get Tommy somewhere safe," Ghost told Reaper, "and stay inside. This isn't your fight anymore." "The hell it isn't," Reaper said. "It stopped being my fight when I had a son. Now it's everything." Ghost nodded. He understood that now, in a way he never had before. He stepped back into the truck and drove to the edge of the property, parking where he could see 3 directions at once. He turned off the engine and waited for sunset, for the sound of engines, for the reckoning that was finally, after all these years, coming home. The first bikes arrived at 6:47 p.m. Ghost counted them as they rolled in, 5 at first, then 3 more, then a full dozen. They came from different roads, different states. Different lives they'd built after the old days, but when the call went out in the old code, they came. That was what the oath meant. Hawk arrived first, scarred, silver-haired, older now, but still carrying the particular authority of a man who'd led by example. He pulled up beside Ghost's truck and killed his engine, the silence that followed heavier than any sound. "Talk," Hawk said, not bothering with greetings. Ghost told him everything, the tire, the boy, the name, Victor. Hawk listened without interrupting, then nodded slowly. "Victor Causa, yeah, I remember him. Wanted to move product, expand territory. You shut that down hard." "I did," Ghost confirmed, "and he never forgave me for it. So now he's out, and he's going to make you sorry," Hawk said. It wasn't a question. What's his play? Leverage the kid. Use the kid to draw me out, then make it hurt. Hawk nodded again. He pulled out his phone and made a single call. Within minutes, a truck pulled up and a woman got out, Mercy, a nurse and a rider, one of the few women in the old crew. She went straight into the trailer, where Tommy and Reaper waited. "She'll keep them safe," Hawk said. "She's good at that. Now, where do we set up?" Ghost showed him the property map, the roads in and out, the kill zones. They positioned bikes on the perimeter, 2-person teams. They set up watches on the main highway. They turned the blue trailer and its dying oak tree into a fortress built from loyalty and engine smoke, and the particular violence of men who'd sworn they'd never use it again, but would, if it meant protecting what mattered. By 8:15 p.m., there were 32 bikes parked in a careful semicircle, their riders checking weapons, checking routes, checking each other's eyes for the clarity that came before a fight. Ghost stood in the center of it all, and for the first time in 15 years, he didn't feel alone. "He'll come at night," Ghost told them. "He'll want darkness, chaos, confusion. He'll want us scattered." "Then we don't scatter," Cross said. Cross was big, methodical, carrying the calm of someone who'd seen war and survived it. "We hold the line. We hold it tight." At 9:30 p.m., a scout called in. "Headlights. Coming north on Route 14. 4 vehicles. Estimate 10, maybe 15 inside." Ghost's hands went steady. He walked to the center of the property, where he could see the road. The other riders moved into position, their bikes ready, their weapons close. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and dust and something else, something like destiny, like consequences finally catching up with choices made in youth and paid for in blood. The headlights appeared first, distant and steady. Then the sound. Engines, heavy and deliberate, not the motorcycles Ghost had expected, but trucks and SUVs, professional military grade. This wasn't a revenge play. This was organized. This was planned. This was war. The vehicles stopped 200 yards from the property line. Ghost counted them. 4 SUVs arranged in a tactical formation. The doors opened in synchronization, and men spilled out, not street soldiers, but professional operators. Military bearing, tactical gear. This was Victor's evolution. Prison hadn't made him weaker. It had made him smarter, meaner, more dangerous. Victor emerged last, his scarred face now marked with additional lines. New scars from inside, Ghost guessed. The man had aged like violence ages, all sharp edges and hollow places. "Ghost!" Victor's voice carried across the distance, amplified by the Nebraska night. "I knew you'd stay close to the kid. I knew you couldn't let it go. 15 years of running, and it still doesn't matter. Some promises you just can't break." Ghost stepped forward, hands empty, visible. Behind him, he could feel 32 riders holding their breath. "The boy is off limits," Ghost called back. "Is he?" Victor smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting cruelty in concrete cells. "See, that's where you're wrong, Ghost. Everything is fair game now. The kid, the father, your crew, everything you built to try and make up for what you destroyed. I'm going to burn it down, and you're going to watch." "What do you want?" Ghost asked, though he already knew the answer. I want you to feel what I felt, Victor said. I want you to lose everything. I want your brothers to die knowing it's your fault. I want that kid to grow up knowing his uncle was responsible for his father's death. And I want you to live with that knowledge every single day for the rest of your miserable life. The wind carried Victor's words across the property like a curse. Ghost's hands clenched, then relaxed. This was the moment. This was where everything crystallized. All the years of running, all the silence, all the guilt that Ghost had carried like a second skin. It all came down to this moment, to a choice between walking away or standing firm. No, Ghost said simply. No. Victor laughed. You don't get to say no, Ghost. You lost that right. I said no, Ghost repeated, and his voice carried the weight of 15 years of penance. I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. I'm not apologizing for choices I made a lifetime ago. You want to come at me? Come. But you touch that kid, you touch Reaper, you touch anyone in that trailer, and what happens next won't be revenge. It'll be justice. And there are 32 men standing behind me who remember what that looks like. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor's hand moved towards something at his hip, and the night exploded into motion. The first shot came from Ghost's left, not from the crew, but from the trailer. Mercy, positioned on the roof with a rifle she'd carried since Desert Storm, had a bead on Victor's shoulder. The shot was precise, non-lethal, designed to wound and communicate. Victor went down, blood blooming across his tactical vest. His men moved to return fire, but they were already surrounded. The bikers had positioned themselves with military precision. Hawk had seen combat, Cross had seen combat, and they'd trained the others well. The SUVs found themselves in a crossfire, pinned down, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Stand down, Ghost shouted. All of you, stand down, or this ends badly for everyone. Victor, bleeding from his shoulder, laughed. It was a broken sound. You think you've won? You think this is over? I've got people, Ghost. I've got reach. I've got options? Cross appeared beside Ghost, his frame blocking the starlight. You don't have options anymore, Victor. You have surrender, or you have death. Those are your choices now. The standoff held for perhaps 30 seconds. Then Victor's men began dropping their weapons, hands visible, defeat settling over them like dust. Victor was bleeding, broken, and his grand plan was disintegrating in real time. His men were being zip-tied by riders who'd learned restraint the hard way. His revenge was turning to ash. Get him medical attention, Ghost told one of the crew. He stands trial for attempted murder, attempted kidnapping, attempted extortion. Let the system have him this time. As the police sirens began their distant wail, a call that had been placed the moment the standoff began, Ghost walked back to the trailer. Reaper stood in the doorway, Tommy beside him, both of them watching the spectacle of bikes and federal vehicles and the particular kind of justice that came from loyalty. It's over, Ghost said. Reaper looked at his son, then back at Ghost. No, he said quietly. Now it begins. Now we rebuild. Now you stay. Ghost understood what that meant. It meant forgiveness. It meant the debt was paid. It meant coming home. The sun rose over Nebraska like a benediction. Ghost sat on the porch of the blue trailer, watching the bikers gradually disperse. The federal agents had taken Victor and his crew just before dawn. Reaper had spent the night inside with Tommy, rebuilding what had nearly been taken. Mercy had gone back to her road, back to her life, carrying the satisfaction of a shot well placed. By 7:00 a.m., only Hawk remained. You're thinking about staying, Hawk said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking about it, Ghost confirmed. Then stop thinking and do it, Hawk said. He pulled out a key, old brass, worn smooth by decades of hands. I bought a garage outside Denver. I'm too old to ride anymore, Ghost. My knees hurt, my heart's got an irregular rhythm, and I've made enough peace with my past that I don't need to run from it anymore. I need someone to run the place, someone who understands bikes, someone who understands loyalty. Ghost looked at the key. It was an offering, a second chance, a life after running. "What about the crew?" Ghost asked. "The crew knows where you are. They know they can find you," Hawk said. "That's what the oath means. Not that we're always together, but that we're never really apart. We're family, the kind you choose, the kind you bleed for. That doesn't stop just because you stop riding the circuit." Hawk placed the key in Ghost's hand. "Rebuild yourself," Hawk said. "That's the final part of the promise. Not just paying the debt to others, but learning to forgive yourself. That's the hard part, Ghost. That's the part that takes time." Ghost closed his hand around the key. It was warm from Hawk's pocket, warm from life lived. He nodded. Hawk rode out an hour later, heading south toward Colorado. Ghost watched him go, the sound of his engine fading into the prairie wind. Around noon, Reaper came out with Tommy and sat beside Ghost on the porch. "You're going to stay a while?" Reaper asked. "A while," Ghost confirmed, "and then maybe Denver, but I'll come back." "Good," Reaper said. He pointed at Tommy. "This one needs to understand what his godfather does. Needs to understand that sometimes the men who ride are the ones who stand between the darkness and everything good." Tommy looked up at Ghost with eyes that held a new understanding. He'd seen something last night that most children never witnessed. He'd seen courage, seen loyalty, seen men choosing to be better than their circumstances demanded. "Will you teach me?" Tommy asked. "About bikes, about how to be like you?" Ghost's throat tightened. He'd been running from this question for 15 years, the question of legacy, of influence, of what he might pass down to the next generation. "I'll teach you," Ghost said. "Everything. The right way." Tommy smiled, and it was the smile of a child who'd been given permission to grow into something good. That evening, Ghost called the mechanic in the last town and arranged to pick up his Harley. The tire would be fixed, the Sabotage would be erased. The bike would run true again. He'd ride it once, back to Denver, to that garage, and that key, and that life that was waiting. But tonight, he'd stay here, in this blue trailer with its dying oak tree, rebuilding what he'd shattered 15 years ago. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something that felt like coming home. 3 days later, Ghost stood on the highway with his Harley, the morning sun catching the chrome like it was reflecting back the light of second chances. Reaper shook his hand, a formal gesture, but one loaded with forgiveness. "Denver's a long ride." "2 days if I push it," Ghost said. "I'll take my time. I need to clear my head." "Stop in Colorado Springs," Reaper suggested. "There's a diner called Rosie's. Cross will be there. He always stops there on his way through. Tell him the situation is resolved. Tell him the oath holds." Ghost nodded. He was about to mount the bike when Tommy ran out from the trailer. "Wait!" the boy called. He pressed something into Ghost's hand. A photograph, faded, from the old days. Ghost, Reaper, and 3 other riders, all of them young and unmarked by consequence. They were smiling at the camera, like the future was something they could control. "So you don't forget," Tommy said. "So you remember who you were. So you can remember who you're supposed to be." Ghost looked at the photograph, then at the boy. He carefully placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart. "I won't forget," Ghost promised. He climbed onto the Harley, kicked it to life, and felt the engine rumble through his bones like a heartbeat. Around him, the Nebraska prairie stretched empty and infinite, all possibility an open road. Ghost engaged the clutch, adjusted the throttle, and began to ride. The sound of the Harley echoed across the prairie, steady, true, and final. This wasn't running anymore. This was moving forward. This was riding towards something instead of away from it. He rode through Nebraska, through Kansas, watching the landscape change beneath wheels that were finally carrying him in the right direction. He thought about promises and debts and the particular kind of strength it took to stop running and face what you'd done. He thought about Tommy's photograph in his jacket pocket and about the garage waiting in Denver, and about a life that was going to be built not on forgetting the past, but on transforming it into something good. In Colorado Springs, he found Rosie's diner exactly where Reaper said it would be. Cross was there, nursing black coffee, and when Ghost walked in, Cross's eyes registered recognition, relief, and the particular satisfaction of a brother knowing another brother had finally found his way home. "It's done," Ghost said, sitting across from him. "Reaper and the kid?" Cross asked. "Safe, strong, building something good." Cross nodded. He pulled out his phone and sent a message, the signal going out through the network of the old crew, bouncing from phone to phone, carrying the news. Ghost was back. Ghost had paid his debt. Ghost was coming home. Like this video if you believe in second chances. Subscribe to see what happens when Ghost finds his garage and discovers there's one more promise he needs to keep. Denver was cold and high and sprawling beneath a sky that seemed to go on forever. The garage sat on the edge of the city, in that liminal space where urban infrastructure gave way to open country. It was a two-story building with corrugated metal siding, wide bay doors, and the particular beauty of a place built to shelter machines and the men who loved them. Hawk had left keys, a title, and a single note. Make it mean something. Ghost stood in the main bay for a long time, taking in the space. There were 4 service bays, tools arranged on pegboards, a small office on the second floor with a bed, a kitchenette, and windows that looked out over the mountains. This wasn't just a garage, this was a sanctuary. He opened the service logs and found decades of work recorded in careful handwriting. Hawk had maintained this place with the dedication of a man tending a shrine. Harley-Davidsons, mostly, but some Triumphs, some custom choppers, some bikes that had clearly belonged to members of the old crew. Ghost began to clean. He worked through the day, moving with the methodical precision of a man returning to something sacred. He swept the concrete floor, organized the tool racks, checked the lifts and hydraulic systems. By evening, the garage gleamed. As the sun set, his phone rang. It was a number he recognized. Mercy, the nurse, the rider who'd taken the shot that started the standoff. "I heard you made it to Denver," she said. "Heard you're setting up shop." "Garage on the north edge," Ghost confirmed. "Hawk's place." "I need a bike serviced," Mercy said. "I'm heading through in 2 days. Can you take it?" "I can take it," Ghost said. Over the next week, riders began to arrive. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. They came in pairs and small groups, and they brought their bikes with them. Cross arrived with a bike that needed the carburetor rebuilt. A woman named Sarah, who'd ridden with the crew in the early days, brought a chopper that needed bodywork. A young man named Marcus, no relation to Ghost's real name, but still came in with a Sportster that needed a complete engine overhaul. Ghost worked on every single one. He listened to their stories, their struggles, their reasons for being on the road. He heard about kids and divorces and redemptions and losses. He heard about the oath in 100 different languages, all of them saying the same thing. We are family. We are loyal. We are here for each other. By the second week, Ghost had a waiting list. By the third week, he'd hired an assistant, a young woman named Dev, who could tear down an engine with her eyes closed and could talk motorcycle philosophy for hours without repeating herself. By the fourth week, the garage had become what Hawk had intended, a sanctuary, a place where men and women who rode could come and know they were among their own, a place where the old oath lived, manifest in cleaned and restored bikes, in shared coffee, in stories told without judgment. One evening, Ghost stood in the bay and looked at the work he'd done. 3 bikes in various states of restoration, their metal gleaming under the bay lights, their engines waiting to roar back to life. He thought about promises, about debts, about the particular kind of redemption that came from building something with your own hands. He thought about the blue trailer in Nebraska and Tommy's small face as Ghost had ridden away. He thought about Reaper's forgiveness and Hawk's key and the photograph that now hung framed in the office. He thought about Victor in prison, serving time for his violence, his revenge consuming him even in confinement. And Ghost realized this was the final part of the promise. Not revenge, not running, not even just paying back what he'd taken. This was transformation. This was taking the worst of himself, the violence, the guilt, the isolation, and transmuting it into something good. Into a place where broken things could be fixed, where lost people could find family, where the old oath could live beyond the men who'd sworn it. Ghost locked up the garage that night with a sense of peace he hadn't known in 15 years. Snow came early to Denver that year. By November, the mountains were white, and the garage had become a warm refuge against the cold. Ghost had expanded the operation, bringing in 2 more mechanics, establishing a reputation that drew riders from across the region. He was working on a carburetor rebuild when the sound of multiple engines pulled him to the bay doors. It was the crew. Not all of them. That would have drawn police attention. But enough. Hawk was there, despite his irregular heartbeat, riding his last Harley before age forced him to stop. Cross came in from the north. Mercy arrived from a hospital shift, still wearing scrubs under her leather. Sarah came with a group of younger riders Ghost didn't know, the next generation of the Oath. They filled the garage, and Ghost understood. This was a reckoning of a different sort. This was the old guard honoring the man who'd finally stopped running. Hawk approached Ghost and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've built something good here," Hawk said. "I've tried," Ghost replied. "More than tried," Hawk said. "You've kept the promise, Ghost. Not to Reaper, not to me, to yourself. You promised yourself that if you ever got the chance to start over, you'd use it to build something that meant something. And you did." The crew stayed through the evening. They ate pizza, drank beer, and told stories, the kind of stories that lived in the gospel of bikers, the tales that got passed down through generations of riders. Ghost found himself laughing in ways he hadn't in years. As they were preparing to leave, Tommy arrived. The boy had grown in the weeks since Ghost had last seen him. He was taller now, more confident, carrying himself with the particular bearing of a child who'd seen darkness and survived it. Reaper was with him, and they looked like what they were, family rebuilt from ashes. "I rode here myself," Tommy announced proudly. "Well, with Dad following, but I rode my own bike. It's a little one, but I did it." Ghost crouched to the boy's eye level. "You rode that bike all the way from Nebraska?" "Dad taught me," Tommy said. "He said that's what you would have wanted. He said you'll teach me the rest." Ghost looked at Reaper, who nodded slightly. The debt had transformed into legacy. "Then I'll teach you," Ghost said. "Everything, the right way, the way that builds something instead of tearing it down." The crew left just after midnight, their bike engines echoing through the Denver streets like a benediction. Ghost stood in the empty garage with Reaper and Tommy, the 3 of them in the fluorescent light and the smell of engine oil and possibility. "You going to be all right?" Reaper asked. "Yeah," Ghost said, and he meant it. "I'm going to be all right." Tommy walked over to where Ghost had framed the old photograph. Ghost, Reaper, and the riders from 15 years ago, all of them young and unmarked by consequence. The boy studied it carefully. "That was you?" Tommy asked, pointing at the young version of Ghost. "That was me," Ghost confirmed, "before I understood what the oath meant." "And now?" Tommy asked. Ghost looked at the boy, then at Reaper, then back at the photograph. He thought about promises and debts, about running and standing firm, about the particular kind of strength it took to transform guilt into purpose. "Now," Ghost said, "I understand. The oath isn't about loyalty to a crew, though that matters. It's about loyalty to yourself, the best version of yourself. It's about becoming the man you promised yourself you'd be." Tommy nodded solemnly. as if he understood something that he wouldn't fully comprehend until much later in his life. Ghost walked them to their truck, watched them drive away toward the highway that would carry them back to Nebraska, back to the blue trailer and the dying oak tree. But Ghost knew they'd return. This was the covenant now. They would always return. They would always be family. Back in the garage, Ghost pulled down the photograph and looked at it one more time. The young man in the picture was smiling like he didn't know yet what choices would cost him. But the man looking at that photograph knew. He'd paid the price. He'd served the penance. And now, finally, he was home. Ghost placed the photograph back on the wall, beneath the words that had become his mantra, his promise, his prayer. Some promises you keep not by running toward them or away from them, but by standing still and building something so good, so true, that the promise becomes part of your bones. He locked up the garage as snow began to fall over Denver. The mountains stood white and eternal against the night sky. The roads stretched out in all directions, ready for the next rider, the next crisis, the next soul searching for family. And Ghost was ready. He was home. He was finally, after all these years of running, truly home. Thank you for riding with Ghost on this journey. He's paid his debts, found his purpose, and built something that means something. If you've been following his story from the beginning, please subscribe and share this video with riders and dreamers everywhere. Because some promises span lifetimes and some redemptions demand everything you've got. See you on the next story. Ride safe, brothers.